and it's from Proverbs chapter 31, where it talks about the excellent wife, beginning in verse 10. I explained a little bit about this. It's arranged in a way which the Hebrews thought would be a little easier to memorize, because verse 10 would begin with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and verse 11 would begin with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet until it was finished, 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And so it's just a way of helping people to memorize this easily, because you couldn't carry a scroll around. It was a huge thing. You couldn't open it up on your lap. You had to have a desk to open it up on. And you needed that so you could scroll through to the place, find the place. You know, for us, finding the place is easy. It's all divided up into verses. It's all divided up into chapters. But the scriptures were not originally written that way. And so we have it very easy. It's easy to pinpoint a scripture. The Hebrews, A, had to do it from memory, and B, even if they could read a scroll, which probably most of them could not, then it was a difficult thing. That's why we read in Scripture that Jesus found the place in the scroll and he sat down to teach, because it's just the way scrolls work. You had to stand up at the table to find the place, and then you sat down to teach. So I'm teaching in a scriptural way, you see. Okay, I found my place in the scroll. Proverbs 31, an excellent wife who can find, for her worth is far above jewels. And from what one hears about the modern dating scene, it's very hard to find the right person. And the Hebrews, of course, didn't leave it to chance. They had usually ladies in the community who were matchmakers, and they would find you somebody suitable, or usually the families, because it was not a question of an individual choosing who to marry. The families would look out for a suitable bride for their son, and maybe vice versa. And in a way, this is what happened to me. Very unusual story and a long story, but anyway, when my wife and I were in our teens, my mother said, "I wouldn't be surprised if you get married one day." And we our jaws dropped, and we said, my wife said, "Who, him?" But anyway, it turned out to be a good marriage, and today is the actual 68th anniversary of our wedding day. And she died 4 years ago, so we had a long marriage. So who can find? And the Jews, of course, had an answer for that. Verse 11, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. Trust is one of the most important things in finding a match. Someone whom you can trust, and someone who trusts you. And that involves a lot of things. It involves not talking bad about your husband or wife when you're with a group of friends. It involves having confidence in the decisions that will be made, and trust that you will work together and so on. So trust is an important thing. And then there are a lot of a lot of verses in here we need to look at. 12 says, she does him good and not evil all the days of her life. So there's this desire to do whatever is good for your partner. And of course the world is tempting you to do otherwise. Especially when guys get together, they are tempted to say bad things about their wives and so on, and vice versa. And this often happens with younger marrieds. Partly, I think, because they think it's the thing to do, and it isn't at all. To me, that betrays a lack of trust. And verse 13 to 15. She looks for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She is like merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises also while it is still night and gives food to her household and portions to her maidens. So she takes care of the household. She's the boss of the household. I was just looking at a little answer sheet that obviously came from someone in one of the very early grades. The question was, who's your hero? And so I guess it was a little boy who said, Dad. And what is it about your superhero that makes you admire him so much? And the kid wrote, he is brave. And then the next question, what do you think would make your superhero, or what do you think your superhero is afraid of? And he wrote, Mom. So she's definitely the boss of the house. Verse 16, she considers a field and buys it. From her earnings, she plants a vineyard. And so she is involved in trade. She's got business sense. Verse 24, she makes linen garments and sells them and supplies belts to the tradesmen. So she is handy. She's a dressmaker, obviously. And backing up a few verses, is a very endearing quality. She extends her hand to the poor, and she stretches out her hands to the needy. And so she is benevolent. One of the things that I really admired about my mother was that she was always looking for somebody that she could help. And there was a widow that lived several blocks away from our house, and I was given the task of taking her regular baskets of food. And there was an orphanage a couple of blocks north of us, and she went there and asked if we could help some of the orphans with a day out every now and then. And so she would do that. She was always looking for people to help. Verse 25, strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. So she has provided for the future. She has a larder full of food, a deep freeze full of meat, and a fridge full of dairy products. So she's always prepared. And verse 26, she opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. And so our children learned respect for others and kindness towards others. And probably the closing verses, or close to the closing, 29 and 30, many daughters have done well or nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. And so character is more important than just pure beauty on its own. So that, I think, is a passage that really merits examination frequently. As you're bringing up children, you want your daughters to be like the excellent wife. And as you look for, if you're into matchmaking, you want to look for a person who is like this if you have sons. And you want your daughters to grow to be like this so that they will have a happy life, a happy marriage. All right, let's turn next to the topic of wisdom regarding work. I think some people feel that work is to be avoided at all costs. And they can be quite skillful at that, but in the end, they're going to wish that they hadn't taken that route in their lives, because they could end up constantly begging for help. You have to have work to sustain yourself. And many people have a natural inclination toward one career or another, but some people they follow what Dad used to do, if they're men, or they look for the kind of marriage that Mom has had. And sometimes dads demand that their children follow in their footsteps. You do what I do, and you're going to be all right. I remember one member of the church in Africa, Doc Stumpf. He went to university and became a chartered public accountant. But that wasn't at all the career that he wanted. He wanted to be a doctor. So he put himself through university to qualify as a physician. And that's really what he was happy doing, really happy doing. So sometimes parents can waste a lot of money deciding on their child's career instead of helping him discover what his real interest is. If you do what you're interested in doing and what you love doing, then you won't do any work for the rest of your life. It'll all just be fun, and they pay you to do it. As my one granddaughter said, after qualifying at college with degree in math, she was interested in a job, and she said, you do this job and they pay you for it? She was interested in the insurance industry. It turns out that her interest has changed since then, but here she was doing advanced math or thinking of doing it as a career, and just absolutely delighted with the idea that this thing she loved doing would earn her good pay. But we all need to work, as the book of Proverbs teaches us, in many ways, many passages. We'll look at a few, and I need a reader. I can hear my voice is not standing up too well. So a reader for Proverbs 6 and verses 10 and 11. Don't be shy.
Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man.
Right. It's just going to creep up on you like a thief. if you want to sleep instead of working. Poverty's there waiting for you. So obviously we need to work. And there's a passage very much like that. I'll just give you the location of the passage. We're not going to read it for time's sake. And that's in Proverbs 24, verses 23 and 24. But something similar, Proverbs 20 and verse 13 says, "Do not love sleep, or you will become poor. Open your eyes, and you will be satisfied with food." But we need to turn to 21 and verse 25. Proverbs 21, 25. Okay. Sorry, I was looking at 25. I was in the wrong place. Okay. The desire of the sluggard puts him to death. His hands refuse to work. And there are all kinds of excuses that are given. I won't give you all the excuses. You'll have to think up your own excuses. But, you know, one of the excuses was, I can't go out to work today because there's a lion in the street and I might get eaten by a lion. And the other is, like a door swings on its hinges, so the man turns over in his bed. It's only got one direction. You know, roll over or roll back. I'm not going to roll out of bed. And so there's several ways in which the sluggard, the lazy person, is found. And laziness can be quite common. And people who are very lazy usually end up with the most basic work because they can't be trusted with much more. So Proverbs 28 verse 19, one that everybody in agriculture can understand quite well. Did I give a verse number? 12 and verse 11. Twelve and verse 11. No, sorry, I may have confused you. Chapter 12 and verse 11. Okay. So it's sensible, if you have land, you cultivate it and plant your crops. But other people pursue worthless things, and maybe they end up chasing after what is not going to be productive at all. At least if you've got the land, till it, plant a crop, you'll have something. Now we can go and look at 28. 28 and verse 19. Yeah. If you follow empty pursuits, then you're going to have poverty and plenty. Depends what you're planting. You know, there's some people who think they have a bright idea for a business, and it's really not going to be very productive. They work hard at it, and sure enough, it's not very productive. Instead of tilling the land where you would have plenty of food. It's kind of like today, a lot of people who go to college are looking for a degree, which sounds glamorous and is wonderful, but there are very few jobs and they don't pay well if you have that qualification. Whereas a less glamorous sounding qualification may make you fit for a really well-paying job. Proverbs 10 and verse 5. This side is a very silent side. Okay, that tells you not only that you've got to do the harvest when it's ready to be collected in, but there is a time when you have to act. And when that time comes, you'd better get busy. In many industries or many jobs, there are certain times when your work is going to be harder and more demanding, but it absolutely has to be done. You know, if you're in the tax business, there are times when you're going to be very busy preparing taxes, and you can't just say, "Oh, I don't feel like it now. I'll leave it for a while." You can't do that. Your job demands that it be done at this time. So when harvest comes, you can't just leave it in the field and say, "Well, I'll get to it next week." It needs to be collected now. So there's a time for all things, and involves your work. You have to do it at the time. We go to work because we want to earn money. And we have to be careful lest money becomes the most important thing in our lives. I think that's what the devil wants. Because Scripture tells us the love of money is the root of many kinds of evil. And so you have to be careful of that. Yes, you have to be industrious to provide for your family, but no, you don't need billions of dollars or millions of dollars. And so Proverbs 23 addresses that in verse 4 and 5.
Labor not to be rich, cease from thine own wisdom. Will thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly making themselves wings, they fly away as an eagle toward heaven.
All right. There's a time when you may feel, I need to invest in this. That's really going to be something that'll pay off well. And you're so focused on how much you can gain from this that you're not wise in the investment. And so it flies away. And people fall into that trap so easily because it's laid out everywhere for us to look at. And then also Proverbs 11 and verse 4. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. What is he talking about, the day of wrath? Judgment Day. Judgment Day, it doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter how poor you are. What does matter is your righteousness, and that is what is going to deliver you. Some people think money can buy everything, but there are things which it cannot buy. All right, we have had a shortened day today, I'll have to speak to Rex about that. Thank you very much for your listening, and enjoy your day. God bless you.